And welcome back, everyone, to the Zanpakuto Creation Series. This one comes to us from Frogman underscore NJO 4NJO. Yeah, what's your name? No, not Disney, dude. Just saying your name's a mouthful. At least let me phrase that. Your handle's a mouthful. Who asked the question, what is the Zanpakuto of Blob, aka specifically the X-Men Origins Blob, Wolverine Blob? Winston Duke is a mutant who was in the movie is actually perfectly at first starts out like super in shape. He's got pretty much near indestructible skin, super strong, all that. But as they say, he developed an eating problem and became the Blob. The Blob actually has his own center of gravity mass, which makes him near heart impossible to move. Plus, is able to basically just absorb all blunt force trauma. So how do I kind of turn that into a Zanpakuto? Hey, he's not a super smart guy. He's not necessarily dumb, but he's just kind of not even a meathead. He's just standard kind of guy. Like there's not really anything that I would say works towards a keto type. So I went with a melee type for him. I think it makes sense. Still a standard katana. I think would be very interesting here, and I might even translate this out to the comic book version of Blob too, is his release would be Stop 'Em Dead Roadblock, or translating out roughly to Dorofusa. Stop 'Em Dead Dorofusa. Its Bankai would be the Unmovable Wall, or Ugoka. Oh, I pronounced it earlier. Ugokano Kabu. It's his the spirit of his Zanpakuto would take the form basically of a very large like golem, not ogre, but like a golem, and it would be very like almost hunched over, and it looks like it's made out of stone, or at least covered in stone. What the sword basically turns into is a pair of giant gauntlet blades, but not in the sense you think. They're actually the blades don't come out over his hands. The blade, and they'd be about the same size as him roughly if you were to put them together, and that's important because they're two halves of the same whole, these blades. But the blades actually span out over his elbows instead, almost like two giant wings. But if he brings them together, puts his hands down and kind of like just stabs the ground, they form a very large shield that's used for defense. And from a defensive capability, they can deflect most attacks without too much difficulty. Again, this all just comes down to Ryatsu to Ryatsu. Higher levels Ryatsu, he's not going to be able to tank as much, at least depending on the attack. He's not going to be able to take a swipe from Zaraki, for example, but he might be able to stave off a little bit of Rage and Jakai, at least at first. The blades ultimately heat up, and that would suck. But yeah, it would take powerful attacks to break through these gauntlets. And they still have the offensive capabilities of these blades they can just use for striking and attacking. Keep in mind, this is not a dual Zanpakuto in that sense because they're just two halves of the same whole. It's more like a Zanpakuto that technically separates immediately upon contact, but you could easily just return it back to its shield form. He can also lift his hands up in just a standard blocking style, like putting your dukes up to cover your face, and make a reverse shield as well. The Bankai is where I think the true nature of the shield comes from. The unmovable wall, as it would be as it'd be called, would essentially the shield expands and just wraps around, not wraps around per se, but encases Duke, and it can repel just about anything. Like its whole design is to rebound. Again, save maybe the strongest of techniques. Again, no Zarashi would work because it's designed for cutting and chopping, and Zaraki's a monster. But even something like Ryujin Jika wouldn't really be able to get through because it's so large, it's able to block that. Only like Zanka no Tachi could work at that point because it's so hot it vaporizes things. But even then, it's working on Ryatsu, so theoretically, if Duke were at least comparable, maybe not equal, but comparable Ryatsu, he might even be able to repel Zanka no Tachi to a degree. Add on to the fact that I think one of the abilities of the shield would theoretically be to move around. Like he can just kind of like, like he can't lift it. There's no handles, but he can just kind of move his hands, kind of like move his hands back and forth. The only problem is he's got to use both hands to move it. So he's kind of like, someone fast enough can easily get within his guard, and there you are. This is not an offensive barrier or an offensive Zanpakuto. This is very much a defensive one with a mild offensive ability in the Bankai and an offense-defense in the Shikai. Now, like I said, that is actually its biggest weakness. It's not Zanpakuto really designed for attack or even attack or combat in that sense. But at the same time, it does have some abilities that can help. It has no range whatsoever. If someone is fast enough, they can just get within his guard. Stronger Ryatsu is an issue. I'd even argue elemental types, depending on the element, could be an issue. Fire, ice, water, as long as they're hitting them direct, especially with the Bankai, shouldn't be an issue. But lightning, because of its speed and because of where its trajectory, could be a problem. Things like wind would be a big problem because wind you can't really stop. Depending on how it's hitting the weapon. So, yeah, I think it works for someone like him. Not the most intellectual of individuals, but certainly not an idiot by any stretch of the means. But anyway, this is the Zanpakuto I created for this character. Let me know if you would like this Zanpakuto or if you would change something up. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you for the next one.